the waiting room. So hi everyone, my name is Victoria Herman and I'm the Principal Director of the Migration in Harmony Research Coordination Network. And this is a network that is funded by the National Science Foundation that is bringing people together over the next 3 years to discuss, connect, and ultimately identify gaps in Arctic migration research. And this is everything from species on the move to settlements being displaced by climate change impacts, from economies moving north, like shipping, but also infectious diseases moving forth. And we want to bring all of these different researchers, storytellers, practitioners, leaders together to identify how we can work together with an Arctic in motion to better inform equitable, sustainable, and just policies. So I will be putting a link to join our network if you are not yet a member in the chat at the end of this webinar. And I highly encourage you to join the network so you can join us for future webinars. I see Wesley is giving a big nod. But also join us in person post-pandemic in Alaska, here in Washington, DC, and in Stockholm, Sweden, for workshops that we have travel stipends available for. But without further ado, today we are going to hear an incredible presentation from Emmy and Webby Award winner and immersive technology pioneer, Wesley Della Volla. And Wesley has spent more than 15 years producing live events and documentaries with National Geographic Society. And he is currently the founder of Meridian Treehouse, which is connecting people across the world with places that they're not able to visit, but need to build empathy with through wildlife and wildlands conservation, climate change action, and science research. And over the next half hour to 45 minutes, Wesley is going to be sharing his past experiences, some lessons learned, and how you can tap into the power of storytelling and bringing people to your research sites, bringing your classrooms to the Arctic without ever leaving your home, which is ever more important in a world of social distancing. So a few general housekeeping notes before we get started. I will ask that everyone please mute yourselves as Wesley is presenting, and then I will open it up to questions and answers after Wesley is done. And once we get to that point, I'll ask that you either type in your question in the chat box, or if you go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and click the participants icon, you can raise your hand there and I will call on you. And you could either ask your question via video or audio, or I can ask it for you if you don't have a great internet connection. I will also be monitoring the chat box throughout the presentation. So if you have any questions from what Wesley is saying, or you have logistical questions, please put them in the chat and I will continue to respond to those as Wesley is presenting. And finally, if you have not already done so, I would encourage you to make sure that you have a presenter speaker on in the top right corner of your Zoom. And this will allow a speaker version of the Zoom screen once we are done sharing the PowerPoint. As a final note, if you need to leave early, that's okay. We won't hold it against you. We will be putting a recording of this up on YouTube later this week, and we'll email that link out to everyone who is registered. So know that if you miss the end, you can catch it on the recording. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Wesley Della Volla.
Well, hello, everyone. That's quite an intro I've got to now live up to as far as expectations. Got to make sure this is really exciting and engaging, and that's what I hope it is, because ultimately that's why we're here. We want to build empathy and connect with audiences, and that's exactly what I've been doing, as Victoria mentioned, for over 15 years at National Geographic and other places, and now with my own company, which is looking to make sure that we innovate the experiences that we can still do and in the future will do, and tell stories that actually drive change, connect people. And throughout my entire career, I've been very fortunate. I've gotten to travel to some of the most beautiful places in the world, from the Canary Islands to Paris for the climate conferences, to the Serengeti in Africa, usually with some gear in tow and different amount, questionable sometimes, whether or not I get along with my coworkers. Long hours, 14-hour days back to back do add up, but there's a payoff. Every now and then you get to have an amazing experience like this. And so when you have these amazing experiences, you really connect with the place. You care about it, you know it. It becomes something that you take with you. And that happens because I was lucky enough to be able to go there. Now, granted, I was there working, so it was not a pure vacation, but sometimes people you encounter are worth the work. Sometimes you're not in great places. Sometimes you're in a 20-foot by 20-foot blast furnace trying to set up a shot with high-speed cameras that are very finicky. Or you're in a bunker hiding in the Mexico desert. Or you're really lucky and you get to go to a place like NASA Ames and JPL and get to work with some amazing scientists. Again, these are all places that I've been very fortunate to go to and work in, and I've been there and I've been able to connect with them. And the whole time I was there, my goal was, how do you connect the places that you're gone and what you've seen and what you've done, and how do you share those stories? So the entire job I've done my entire life is go to these places, capture stories, information, and share with people and hope that they care and connect. So usually behind a pretty picture like the one you just saw is something like this. I'm usually carrying everyone's gear, their bags if they're talent, or trying to use said bags to get that perfect shot with varying degrees of success, but also trying out new technology. And so technology has always been something that's been hugely important to sharing stories and telling stories and connecting with people. In my 15 years, I've seen technology advance to ways that I can't explain. Like, it's hard to explain if you'd asked me in 2005 when I was working with tapes and worrying about shipping them, logistics, weight, that one day we'd be talking about digital cameras and things that are this big and GoPros. So you try out new technology to tell the story, to capture that perfect moment, to take people there. Because ultimately when people go somewhere, they really care about it and they connect with it. So you do some soldering, welding, some brunt force to attach a shelf to mount the camera to the side of a car. You stare down the barrel of a high temperature blast furnace with cameras, sit in the middle of the desert for hours at a time trying to make very finicky high-speed cameras do their work, often after 14, 15-hour days. And of course, improvisation is always key to anything you're doing, because those cameras and new technology are never fully dependable, especially when you're the one trying them out for the first time and pushing their limits. But again, this is all in the effort to take people somewhere and connect. And throughout my time working in storytelling, especially focused on conservation, climate change, and science, adding in new technology really is a way to sometimes connect with people who wouldn't normally be brought into a story. So oftentimes you're thinking, okay, there's this great thing, this great story, this great effort that people are doing. How do you bring someone in who may not normally find it? And technology and new ways of storytelling is often that way. And the best way I've found so far has really been immersive, and has been with VR 360 natural history documentary video. Actually, what you're seeing is the first time I tried on headset. It's actually not me trying on the headset. That is one of my former colleagues, who was my boss at the time, trying VR for the first time. And from the moment I put that headset on that you see on the screen right now, which is back in April 2015, because it's geotagging and all the information on my camera, I know exactly when this photo was taken. And that was the first time I experienced virtual reality and realized that this was the way to tell stories. It felt different. The moment you put a headset on, you feel like you're there. So that question, that quest as a storyteller to make people feel like they're there with you, to get them into something, get them in the middle of the action, of the experience, what's going on. Well, let's actually take them there. And the gentleman that you see in the picture, his name is Max Solomon, and I think he's explained it the best way that makes what virtual reality so special compared to traditional storytelling is in VR, there's no barrier between you and what's happening. Your eyes are the camera. You are the director. You decide where you look, what you engage with, but anything that interacts with you, it feels like it's interacting with you. You're not watching through a camera. So that changes how you interact, how you remember, how you feel. And there's great work being done at many places, including the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford. We were doing some at National Geographic, which I'll get to shortly. But this was an exciting way for me to experience storytelling and a way to experience it on a very intimate but small scale. You could show your friend and they could be amazed, surprised, or like my friend Lauren, really scared and never wanted me to get near her with a headset again. And that was her first and last time with VR. She says, I've gotten her to do it again. Ultimately, it's a really exciting and engaging way to see something, but it has limits. There are technical hurdles. There are access hurdles, funding, money to buy headsets. Technology is constantly changing on the forefront, but ultimately the storytelling is what's important. What it comes down to is you're able to transport someone directly to a place where you were, where the camera was, and they get to feel like they're there. And that is something that we're always trying to do with storytelling on an important issue, because that's what creates empathy, is that feeling like you're there. Oftentimes when there's something that's important you're trying to share with someone, it may not actually connect with them until the moment they've experienced it themselves, or someone they know has experienced it, so that it feels close. I think in a time of COVID, that's actually something kind of poignant to think about, as people are not sure what to believe, how serious things are. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's not until it hits close to home that you realize an important issue is an important issue that affects you. So how do you do that in a positive way and have them connect with something? So to understand the majesty of Bears Ears National Park, or anywhere in the Arctic, which is oftentimes a place very few people get to go and seems unreachable. Well, how do you make the inaccessible accessible? And VR does that like nothing else I've ever seen. But again, high touch. You've got a one person, kind of one-to-one interaction. How do you expand on that? Well, that's when you get a crazy idea to build a theater at National Geographic. And I know there's someone watching who's in the group right now who got to see this kind of firsthand. So she knows very well what this is like when you have a couple headsets that become a few more headsets that you have to recruit everyone in your life to help you with, set up some more headsets. But as you're doing this, you're learning and advancing, the how you tell a story, but you're also realizing that at some point you're going to be able to take people someplace on a scale more than just one person. So if the ultimate goal about storytelling and connecting with people is to build empathy and drive connection, is it better to do it 1-to-1, or is it better to do it 1-to-450? And in a way that is still so captivating that it actually makes your brain, from the research I've been reading and colleagues I'm working with, it comes very close to your brain thinking you're there. So the way your whole body remembers it is very different than watching a flat screen. And again, more headsets, lots of remotes and controllers, more headsets, and as you can see, a whole lot of headsets. But in the end, it's worth it, because this is what happens. You're able to, again, see the smile, the reaction. Someone is connecting with something in a way that cannot be denied. I know that for documentaries, having produced them, I know how important they are, how vital it is to share this information, because that's how people learn about things. And for me growing up, it was the magazine of National Geographic, or the documentaries on PBS and MSNBC growing up, that theme song, that was my connection to the world. This is how you actually take people to the world. without them having to leave their homes or theaters, their nearest theater, whatever way it is. But to do scale, you were kind of limited by location. So again, as you're thinking about ways that immersive can be really useful in connecting with important issues and building empathy, one other thing that often comes up, and I mentioned it earlier, is that it's kind of VR and immersive kind of has a double edge where it connects you with what you're viewing, but it also cuts you out from the world directly around you because you're fully in a headset. You can't interact with your friends. It's kind of something you do on your own. Now there are advances coming in where you can do interactions with things that are CGI and you can have avatars, but it's not real. 360 documentary VR, or not VR, 360 documentary video really makes you feel like you're there. But what takes it to the next level is if you're with someone who's seeing it the same time you are, experiencing it, and if you see something really cool and you say, look left, and your friend looks left, and they see the same thing you are, is that a memory? Is that an experience? Or are you watching a story? And that's where I think immersive and by think, kind of seen in a way that very few people have gotten to see in that theater where we had 400 people at a time for, I believe, 14 shows before it was shut down for COVID, who experienced going to multiple places from the bottom of the ocean to the moon together in a way that's wholly unique. People would leave and it wasn't I saw something, it was we did, we went. We had a group of students who went in, and the real amazing thing was we had a presenter who you'll meet later. I'm talking about her, who was talking about underwater ecosystems, and students saw her presenting with traditional media and asked her questions about where she went to school, why did she want to be an ecologist. All the questions were about the speaker because they wanted to be her, which is amazing in its own way. But then the next group saw the same presentation with VR, and they asked about the animals they saw. It's if the speaker had disappeared, and what they remembered was being in this place and the animals that were there and connecting with it. So when we talk about building empathy and a connection and a motivation to care about something, I have not seen anything like that in my 15 plus years of storytelling on platforms from television in both standard definition to HD, to textbooks, to digital, to social. Immersive is different than even in person because you get to have that connection of being in person, but going somewhere. And it's been incredible to have those experiences and to see that reaction. We've done some tests. We did some testing and audience feedback while I was at National Geographic, and people generally were kind of meh about it if you can't tell by the reactions. It was really amazing to get this feedback, to see that people really felt that they were getting something they weren't expecting. They were taken to places, and the VR actually helped. It helped with understanding and comprehension and feeling they got to know a place better. And this was all done through surveying through the audiences while I was there. We were asked at a big festival every year. National Geographic would have an Explorers Festival in June, and they would ask all the attendees, 200-300 of National Geographic explorers, the people that are out there doing science storytelling, what event they like the best. And the year we had the first virtual reality show, 43% of the respondents chose that one. And you can see at the bottom, if they had chosen all the events equally, it would have been 8%. So even with those that are part of the science telling community or in other ways engaged with it, they find new excitement and are energized and want to continue to share their stories because they see how they connect with it. So they want to work and do the same thing. But I was tired of being in a theater. So what do you keep doing? And I didn't realize at the time that this would be a precursor to where we are now in the world, because no one saw the global shutdown that was going to come from COVID. But we were able to, through kind of taking leftover pieces from different parts of the theater and some, you know, a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, built a portable theater that could go anywhere. So then again, the connection keeps going. That immersive experience can go anywhere. It can leave a theater. You can go to where it's most needed, whether it be classrooms, whether it be like this, the side of a mountain in Aspen, Colorado, where you have 5,500 outdoor sports enthusiasts learning about climate change on Mount Everest and the work that scientists are doing there. Not exactly something you catch people in, like, you want to watch someone drill an ice core? Very important science, sometimes not the most exciting thing to share, but people need to know about it. So you get them to climb Mount Everest together. So these three people are experiencing the same virtual experience together, so they can interact with each other, take silly selfies of them in the headsets, but also be completely amazed that they are 27,000 feet up Mount Everest on the side of a mountain in Aspen. But kids, I mean, you've just, the amazing way that you can connect with students and their educators. It's really something powerful to know that you can go in and then have and build that connection at any age, because it's so captivating and exciting that you're drawn in. But there's a future of what's next. And I think that's where we are right now. So I'd mentioned that speaker earlier. This is actually her. This is Dr. Erica Woolsey. She is the founder and CEO of the Hydrus, which is an educational nonprofit focusing on immersive technology to help with education and do work like this. And I'm fortunate enough to be one of their advisors working on it. But in the process of becoming more familiar with immersive, we thought of ways to how do we bring this next? What do you do? And immersive has a really powerful way of doing that and is becoming easier to do. So one thing I'm hoping we can talk about is some of the technology. I don't have it built into the presentation, but would love to chat with people about how technology is changing and new experimentations you can try, some of the prosumer consumer ways that you can record 360 and do, you know, unique things with it. But this was starting to create immersive exhibitions that could travel and stay at museums, learning centers, with pre-recorded intros from explorers in different places. So that way you get that connection. Or what Erica's created with her team at the Hydrus is a fully immersive experience where you get to walk in and you start out as though you're in this exhibit and you dive right in. And one thing that she's been able to do, which I couldn't find a great way to showcase this on a slide, she may have done the world's largest virtual dive in conjunction with the UN Foundation, and was able to take people diving. So you were connected throughout the world through a Zoom, and you get to go diving together. Now, it wasn't synchronized like the theater experience, because that takes a dedicated network and being in proximity to each other, and a lot of technology that gets very deep in the weeds, which I won't put any of you through unless you really want to ask about it. You can always follow up. But we're able to have people around the world go diving with her by scanning a QR code on the screen and into their device, whether it be a headset or a phone or other tablet. So the Hydrus team is pushing the boundaries of what you can do with storytelling as far as immersive, and they're going to continue to do it. And they're really focused on education that looks at immersive as a component to overall education. So you have immersive joined with tactile objects or things that are hands-on, games, traditional teaching tools. So really looking at it for what it does best, which is taking you somewhere, surrounding you in an experience so you feel like you're there. That is the power of immersive, is to take you into something and you completely forget that you're not there and you really connect with it. But the next step is hopefully what this is going to be, which is the synchronized playback. So a shared synchronized immersive reality experience, trademark pending, where you can have, like this Zoom call shows, you can have these 7 people on 2 continents in 4 different cities going to the same place at the same time. So it's a really powerful and special tool that is poised right now to be really important as we all try and find ways to stay connected when we have to stay physically distanced. Even talking about this, for me, like, I was talking with a good friend of mine about being able to send her headset to her mom, and they both get to go climbing sequoias together. She almost started crying just thinking about the idea of being able to have that connection, that experience with someone. So imagine that on a scale of trying to connect with a place that needs protection, or a big topic, or big ecological focus, to get people to care and have that same sense of wanting to be there as if they were. So that's the power of immersive and what it can do. And there's a lot more that I can talk about and share about, but I wanted to tee everyone up because I know there's a conversation after this, and hopefully give people some jumping points to ask more questions based on what we've been able to do and see and create. And I definitely want to stress, because I have no idea who's watching, but I always say this, it was a full team effort. As you saw the work that went into this, there's people that I couldn't show pictures of because we were usually too busy doing things. But there were, I would say, tens, if not hundreds of people somehow involved, from people who make sure that there was power in the theater, to the people creating the content, to those actually out creating educational materials, and so much more. So I can't thank them all enough, but it was really fun to lead that team and get to know immersive in a way and see what it can do, and really become an evangelist for it. I guess that it's definitely has a special power to connect with people and create something that is more lasting than just watching something and then going on with your day. It sticks with you. And there's been some anecdotal and more than anecdotal evidence through V Hill and other places that show that this really does build empathy.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Wesley. If I could have a virtual silent round of applause. That was an incredible presentation that brought us literally across the world. I know we have a few questions already in the chat and some from Instagram earlier this week. As a reminder, if you have questions, please type them in the chat now, or go to the participant icon at the bottom of your screen and just click the raise hand button so that I can call on you, and you can unmute yourself and ask Wesley a question directly. I think I am going to go over to the chat, and we have a few questions already coming in. So the first question is if you could talk about the differences of planning for virtual reality storytelling versus standard photo video storytelling, and what differences you found in that process of planning for each of those different types of storytelling.
First things first, let me unmute myself. So anyone who's familiar with storytelling, with traditional filmmaking, TV producing, video work, you plan things and you make sure you know what you're going to do. With virtual reality, it's even more important to plan and pre-production and know exactly what you're going to do. Because once you get there, you can't hide anything. It's 360, it sees everything. Especially with a lot of the consumer cameras now, you have two lenses. You have a 180 and then another 180, and you get your 360. So anything you see, so like the one image I showed, and if I can go back to it, we actually had to go through and take stills of a space with nothing in it, and then film so that way we could hide like microphones and lighting, because you can't hide anything. So you really need to plan and think about what you're going to do and ahead of time to make sure that you share the story you want, because the 360 doesn't miss anything. And once people are in headset, they're the director, you're no longer the director. So with traditional video, you can choose cuts and directions and you guide where people look. You can hope to do that with sound cues or movement cues within 360, but they're ultimately going to look everywhere and decide where they go. So you have to think of that way ahead of time and go in prepared to, showcase everything. And one other big thing is where you put the camera and what you do. A good example of that is if you're with 360, you want to be in the middle of everything. You don't want to be off to the side. You don't want to have, it be, whatever action's happening far away from your camera, because the whole point of 360 is to be somewhere and be in the middle of something and engage with it. So you have to plan that way. So when you plan those shots, you plan to have, 360 in the middle, have everything, like, be in the center of it. So there's no there's no long shots, there's no far away cameras, it's in the middle. So if you're filming wild animals, how do you do that safely, ethically, and make sure that your camera comes back in one piece, hopefully. Always a risk, cameras don't always come back. But in that respect, it's basically making sure that you plan ahead of time to know exactly what you're gonna film, that you can get in close and personal. And then finally, how are you gonna transfer media and charge all the batteries? That's also one thing. These are big files, so they take a lot of time to transfer over. And anyone who's filming things like this, it takes all the work to plan, get there, bring equipment. You need to make sure that you get the files offloaded, backed up, so that they're safe, and all that work that you just did was not for nothing. So those are the biggest things to think about, is what you're gonna film, how you get there and do it, when you're there, how you're gonna get in and film exactly what you want and make it so people really wanna connect. And then how do you make sure that all that work you did is backed up and secure, so you can make something with it to eventually tell the story. And that's, very similar to normal filmmaking, but it's a little different in that the biggest thing is really plan, really think, but make sure you get right in the middle of it. Get that lens up close and in person, someone's face. If you've got animals, get as close as you can. You want to go where you can't otherwise go, and virtual reality and 360 video is the way to do it.
Great, thank you. So some similarities, but also a lot of differences in that planning. We have another question from Anne Simonis, who will be our next webinar presenter next Tuesday. Thanks. Talking about whale acoustics.
I like this throw too. This is awesome.
Yeah. Anne, did you want to say your question yourself, or do you want me to read it? Oh, okay, I'll ask it for you. So Anne wants to know, for people with smaller budgets than Nat Geo, how would you recommend producing and supporting virtual reality experiences?
So I would say for smaller budgets, the thing is there's some great consumer cameras. That's a good place to start. So if you have a smaller budget, also to be very clear, National Geographic not always had the most massive budgets either. A lot of this was dedication to people by people who really cared about the new platform and wanting to tell the story. But that said, it can be a very expensive medium. So this is a very good question. I would say, think of ways to be scrappy, think of consumer cameras. So GoPro Max, Insta360, they've all got options that are under a couple $100, which I know is not nothing, but on the scale of what it takes to make films, especially 360, they are much more affordable. And the unique thing about that is a lot of what they're doing still has benefit, even if it's not in a headset, which I know is a limit, again, to access. The big drawback to any of this new technology is access, and how do you make it more equitable? And that's constantly a question that we faced in the theater, outside of the theater, and then anything I do now, is how to make it more equitable. And one way to do that is having things available so that they can be interacted with virtually over the internet. So that way the files and experience can be viewed on anyone's device. So the democratization of immersive experience is actually making it so people can access it on their tablets, devices they already have, bring your own device kind of situation, where you provide the content and the experience, and then the experience attendee provides their own device. And that's probably the best way. Other than that, prices are continue to go down for headsets. The Oculus Go's, which have just been discontinued, when we first bought them were $400 when they first came out. The last round you could have bought were $150, and that was in a couple of years span. So the technology, like anything else that we've seen recently, has just exponentially gotten more cost effective. But to go back to that question, the big thing is try consumer cameras. The GoPro Max is really fantastic. They make great cameras. The Insta360 Nano is actually an interesting one. You can put it onto your phone and it does 360 live streaming. So there's a really unique way to take people with you where you are into locations and field sites with a camera that costs under $200. And if it's being live streamed to YouTube 360, anyone with the link could watch it. So that way you get an experience for the lowest barrier. It may not be the experience where 450 people see the same thing at the same exact time, but it will be very close and give you as close to that experience as you can on a budget that might be more accessible for nonprofits, for education, for greater reach to communities that may not have the financial, means to have this cutting edge technology yet. Still ways to work on that, hopefully.
And I wonder, before going into the next question, which we have many, maybe you could also talk a little bit outside of the immersive technologies, but you recently ran a Instagram Live festival that took viewers across Washington, D.C. for 24 hours, where you brought hundreds of people across the country to bagel shops and parks, to theaters, to drag shows. Could you
the drag show is kind of amazing,
that experience, and bringing people in for no cost of just being able to upload videos and go live on Instagram?
And that was actually a great thing to bring up, because it was a new way to go live and connect people, because you have an instant engagement with Instagram Live. People can comment, people can interact, you can bring people in. So those who aren't familiar with Instagram Live, it's live broadcasting through Instagram's platform. And the great thing about it is, if someone has the handle that is your account, so I partnered with a group called Brightest Young Things. We were the official launch partner for Instagram's small business functionality to help small businesses raise money at the beginning of COVID. And this was really born out of us wanting to support our community. And I think one thing that this, we're talking about at Migration and Harmony, this is supporting each other in a community that's, across the globe for, common goals. This is what this was. This was bringing DC together, that we couldn't actually be with each other, which is a whole different, that's another talk, how this actually happened. But it was bringing the community together, and it was free, because Instagram, as you can sign in, you have the account, you can broadcast out, and anyone following the account gets notification that there's something happening, and you can tune right in and you're there. And it's one-to-one. It's that closeness that immersive brings you in a different way, where you are face-to-face with someone, because it's live and it's happening. You can't really pre-record. You can't go outside of your phone, so there's no professional cameras. So you are really getting to be where these people are. And one of the best, I think, that did it was 930 Club, which is a iconic club here in DC. That used to be Duke Ellington's and has now become Billboard's #1 music venue for a couple years in a row. Everyone's played there. They put on a show where they had a DJ with drag queens popping in and out, because you could request them to join into the live stream. So you had talent. I mean, granted, it's all on your phone, or if you stream it up to your TV, you can see it, or your laptop screen. But it was us all having a night out when we all couldn't do it. And you could engage with each other, you could chat in comments. And it was honestly one of the most fun jobs I've done, because I got to hang out with all my friends and didn't have to leave my apartment. I mean, I could have been in pajama pants the entire time, but I got to connect with everyone. And in case you're wondering, I was in pajama pants the entire time, because that's totally how I would like to go out forever now. But it was amazing to connect with people and have conversations, and it sparked even more conversations. We didn't raise a ton of money. We had over 20,000 people tune in, but then people realized, oh, my favorite coffee shop is still selling things. I can buy coffee online, or, this artist is still making drawings. Let me support her. And so it really brought a community together for free, and was really an easy way to connect, because you had Instagram already on your phone. So that's also the flip side of any new technology, is how do you reach people? So you kind of go with the platform that is widest accessible and build for that, and also build up to the more exclusive ones, which don't like that word, but the ones that are a little, harder to access. and take more technological know-how or funding that'll hopefully shift and keep everyone interested.
And who knows, maybe there is a future Migration in Harmony Festival bringing us around the world to all of our awesome members on this call and their hometown
Sounds like fun to me.
Research areas. I'm going to call next on Kristen Marcel to unmute yourself and ask your question to Wesley.
Hello, Wesley. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. It's really, it's triggering a lot of thoughts in my mind, but the question that I shared in the chat was, do you have more that you can share about the research that's been done about how it connects to building empathy and kind of the actions people might take afterwards, right?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm the practitioner. I'm the experience designer. So, and oftentimes I'm the platform with which a lot of the research is being done. So it's often not my own. And I want to make sure that I'm not speaking about other people's research or, taking credit for or get anything wrong. What I can do with Victoria is follow up after with some papers that have been sent to me that I've referenced. In particular, though, I would say check out anything from the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford. They are really at the forefront of what Immersive does, and they're actually housed not in the School of Communication or Engineering, they're in the School of Psychology. So they're really looking at what VR and Immersive does with your brain and your thinking, and how it literally does drive empathy. And they have been doing tests, and they have been doing research, and papers have been published recently that showcase that. Some of the anecdotal evidence is, imagine being given a task where you have to enact your empathy to help someone. And what does that do after you leave the experience? Do you have more empathy because you're already in that mindset? So are you in the mindset of the task I've been given while I'm in this virtual world is to help someone? You pull the headset off, and do you continue to help people once you're out of the headset? I'm trying to be as vague as I can, only because I want to make sure I'm not saying things I can't, but there is building evidence that shows that the answer to that is yes. So it goes beyond the headset. And that's the important thing too, is it's not just while you're there, it's while you're outside of it as well. So there's some very interesting things going into that. And then the work that we were doing at National Geographic through a grant that we got was looking at that student engagement and what they thought afterward. And as I'd mentioned earlier, it changed how they thought and how they looked. So what they looked at and what they cared about and what they wanted to know more about. So things that I can definitely speak on is that with our A/B testing, anecdotally, you can see that the perspective of what was important and what students wanted to learn more about and what they connected with changed with immersive versus traditional video. And it was to the point of electric. The kids' reactions were like, that was wow. I mean, kids were just going crazy compared to not having VR. And it wasn't just the novelty of the headset. They kept asking questions about the animals they engaged with. And it lasted longer than just that day, just that the 10 minutes they were in the headset lasted all day, the excitement. Hearing them in the museum afterward, they were so loud because they were just curious and engaged and wanted to do more. And that was because of VR. And the speaker is really amazing. Erica's really great on stage. If you ever get a chance to see her or do a dive with a hydrus, do it. But yeah, I can share some of the information afterward, but I don't have it directly, and I don't want to misspeak on anyone else's research. That's not my focus area. My focus area is giving them ways to test out their theories oftentimes.
And like Wesley said, we can share some of those papers in the follow-up email that will also have the link to the recording of this, so we can give you a few homework papers to read. And before going into our
everyone likes homework, right?
Yeah, we're thirsting for it in the summer. All of us are out of school for another week. Before going into our next question, I just wanted to give a shout that Kristen does lead the Climigration Network, which also works to build empathy with communities being displaced from climate change impacts. So I would urge you all to go to climigration.org and check out her incredible work and the incredible work of the network. And yes, this is biased because I am on the steering committee, but it is incredible work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Victoria.
So our next question is from Corinne, and she asks, as with all technological advancements, there should be a gut check of just because you can doesn't mean you should. Are there any ethical considerations for the use of this technology?
Corinne, thank you for that question. I'm always looking for the ethicists in the room to do just that, or those that are thinking ethically minded, because that is an important question. One thing I say very often, not directly related to ethics, but yes, this is fun, yes, it's exciting, and we can do it, but does it do anything, and should we keep doing it? And that's always been my thought process with virtual reality and immersive. You know, it's fun, it's whiz bang, new technology, you get to go in virtual reality, it just sounds cool. But beyond that, does it actually do anything? Does it make an impact? Does it drive any kind of reaction that is hopefully moving things towards social good? And that's what a lot of the work that's being done right now is trying to find out, to make those next moves. And to go back into ethics a little bit, one thing that we also have been working with, and again, V Hill at Stanford is really a great resource for this, and I'll share some of this information with it after this, is basically under age 11, the brain is not mature enough to tell what's a memory and what's not at that point. Like kids in imagination, you think about imaginary characters and the cartoons they watch, those are friends, those are people. The object permanence and the way their brains are developing aren't quite at the point where they can discern it. So they were never put in headsets as far as our student testing. We made sure that we didn't do that. And that was an ethical call that we made in conjunction with Stanford and other researchers to make sure that we were not putting students in a place where there's potential to do something like that. So I'm not sure if I'm hitting on the exact answer about the ethical, should we? I know that, and probably shouldn't say this in public, but I have jokingly called what I created at the theater the yellow mirror, because of National Geographic's iconic yellow border and black mirror. Like, has this become something that's a little creepy? There were some moments watching 450 people all look around and do the same thing, but wouldn't that happen at a concert? Wouldn't everyone be fixated on the performer? Or if the performer came out in the crowd, or if you're at Cirque du Soleil and there was someone over here but someone over there, you'd do the same thing. You'd look around, some people look left, right, all look together. So in that aspect, that's kind of how I was thinking about it, from that way of, if you're really experiencing something live and together, the engagement and interaction was really similar. But when it comes to other aspects of it, there should always be more work done in ethics. I think it's a hugely important field that oftentimes is overlooked. Yes, we can, but should is always a good question. And usually it's right after for a reason, and should always be there, if not right in line with it. But the ethics, then I also kind of want to flip back at you, not at you, but to everyone, the broader you, not you directly, Corinne, is if you are able to provide a way for people who can't leave their homes, who are in, medical, whether it be medical or other reasons, the access to the outdoors by putting on a piece of technology and being able to go into redwood forests. And because of that, they're de-stressed a little bit, or they're able to get some of the benefits of being in nature. Shouldn't we also, the ethical question then is, why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we doing it more? Why isn't this funded? Why can't you have headsets that do this in every senior home across the country, or every school where they don't have access to nature because of their demographics or geography? That would be my almost ethical question, is why aren't these more places, and why isn't it more readily accessible?
Important questions, and I've written down that I'm going to ask you at the end if we have time based on that answer. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Doris Frederick, who is a senior fellow at the Arctic Institute, and I'll have her unmute herself to ask her question.
Hi, thanks so much, Wesley, for talking about
Doris, we can't hear you very well.
I'm sorry, is it better now?
Yes, yeah, that's perfect.
Wonderful.
Okay. Thanks so much for the presentation on this exciting opportunity. So my research is on human-wildlife conflicts, and I was wondering if you have any experience with creating empathy for threatened animal species.
So within the 360 World Immersive, one of the projects I was fortunate enough to really get to work on early on, as it was being finalized and created and then turned into experience, was actually going into the Okavango Delta, which is one of the, it's the 1000th UNESCO World Heritage Site. The headwaters in Angola goes through Botswana, one of the largest, I don't want to use the word pristine, deltas in the world, and has a lot of wildlife and a lot of richness. And a lot of that 360 gets you very close to animals. You are, because the way the 360 was created, it was created ethically and responsibly. So you could actually, the cameras were low, they were in ways that weren't, stress inducing to the animals, and they would find them on their own and interact with them. So you got to have that. But then part of the storytelling, and this is where I think 360 is a tool to a storyteller. So you may have this great camera and you may have it captured, but if you don't tell the right story, then what you're hoping to do with wildlife conflict is not going to happen. The narrator is taking you through the Delta and talking about hippos and how hippos have not interacted with people before because of war and conflict. Humans haven't been into the Okavango in generations of hippos. So hippos don't know what people are, except for some that may know from pre-war, and they have this visceral reaction to fight off humans. And you have to meet them with empathy and understanding. Well, this hippo, last time they saw something that looked like me, it killed every one of their friends. So I think a lot of it comes down to storytelling, and 360 and immersive is a way to push that connection that you can have with a good story just a little bit further and make it a little bit stronger. But if you have a bad story, you're just connecting a bad story with really cool technology and video. So that's where I think there is potential with wildlife conflict to really have people understand what an animal's life is like, what it's like for people when they interact with each other, with animals. And oftentimes debunking some myths too, because we all hear stories about what animals are like, but unless you're a researcher out there and, getting to know these animals better, and more people are doing that, we really don't know. But this is an opportunity to kind of enhance the storytelling. So I'm hoping that answered the question the way that you were hoping, or not hoping, but answered the question to hope you would find.
Yes, thank you.
And I will say that for those of you who missed our first webinar with Michael Snyder, there is a great recording of it that goes through how to think about your research in the framing of a story. And I think that pairs really well with what Wesley spoke about today. And going back and visiting that, we'll link to it in our follow-up email, would be, I think, really meaningful to connect how you tell a story with the technology you use to tell that story. We have a follow-up comment and question from Corinne about that awe that you experience in virtual reality and the importance of building empathy. And she asks, can you address the importance of wonder and awe in building empathy? So how important is that in this work, and how do you make sure you're successful at doing it?
And the sense of wonder is critical. It's key. And that's one thing that will drive people to want to do more and connect. You have to showcase things that make them more curious. You have to leave them wanting more. I think is the best way to think about this when it comes to wonder and awe. If you give them something, you're like, oh, for 5 minutes, I was in this big, huge, cathedral-like spires of redwoods and I got to climb up them. That was really cool. Well, I want more. And how do I get more? You learn, immersive is a spark that drives curiosity. And that's kind of how I think about it, which is what wonder is. It's what sparks your curiosity. It's wonder. It's like, oh, this is something new. This is exciting. This is different. I care, hopefully, is what you're really going for. So I want to know more. And if I know it, then I'll care about it even more. And it keeps kind of snowballing. It's a feedback loop. I mean, I was a kid obsessed with sharks and the Titanic. Don't ask me how the last one happened. I can still quote you ridiculous amounts of details. But if I were able to do an immersive experience where I got to go to the bottom of the ocean and be on the Titanic's decks right now, I would do it. I would find a way to make it happen. But that's that wonder, and it just feeds off each other. Victoria, can I steal the moderator thunder? And there's a great question from Lena that I kind of want to just kind of piggybacks into with the sense of wonder and going places. And it's a great question that Lena has, which is, I think maybe it came across that I equate a virtual forest to the real thing, and reality is that it's not the real thing. But when you are not able to access the real thing, this is as close as you can get. And there are varying ways that it's close. If you look at immersive content flat on your laptop, think of it as a scale of 1 to 10. A 1 is you're looking at your laptop, you have the same connection as you would with traditional video. So it's not that great. It's like watching a movie. If you watch it on your phone and it's a 360 video and you can move it around, you can kind of have a sense of, you're in a place, but you're still really tethered to the world around you. Well, then maybe you put on a cardboard, so it's a little better. And that's probably about a 6 or a 7 on that scale of 1 to 10. So you've almost closed out the world that you're, the place you're sitting, and you're almost completely enveloped in that virtual world. But you put a headset on where you don't see the outside. You've got audio coming in, you've got video coming in that fully immerses you. You feel like you're there, and that's a 10. But if you want to turn it up to 11, you can add in 4D, which is smells, temperature. There's actually a great experience called The Tree, where you actually start out, they give you a seed, and as you're going through this experience in a forest, at some point you feel things beyond just what you see and hear, and it's that next level of storytelling. So you've got this great story, you've got a great way to experience it, audio and visual. What's the next thing? Because stories are more than just audio and visual. Their sound, they're not sound. I keep going back to sound. Their smell, their texture, their feeling. So it's using all your senses. It can be done. It just then becomes a different way of using immersive, and oftentimes has to be done on a very small scale, because it has to be safe. So you have to have someone there to make sure if you are able to move around that you're not going to walk into something, hurt yourself, fall over. If there's something, a heat element or a cold element, you're not going to burn yourself. So you're not going to freeze or burn yourself. There's all these things that go into it. So there's ways to do it, and it's not the real thing. But if you are, unfortunately, like for me, and it's become more personal as the more I've worked with immersive, I know I'm not going to be able to climb Mount Everest or many mountains or climb sequoias because I have physical limitations. But I still want to do those things. And you saw the life where I was, traveling around doing all these crazy things as a young filmmaker. That's part of who I am. But unfortunately, moving forward, I may not be able to do a lot of it. But with immersive, I can get as close to that as I possibly can because I have the technology. Now, yes, I'm not going to be there doing those things that I might have been able to do in my 20s, but it's going to be as close as I can now, and I'm going to make the most of it. So that's what this really does, is it makes the most of, this virtual technology to take people places they can't otherwise go for whatever the reason is. So that's the important thing. It's not a forest, but it's about as close as we can get to a forest if we can't get there. And sometimes it's not just us getting there that's the issue. It's the fact that a place is overloved or shouldn't be accessed. And so that's the big thing to take into consideration also, to go back to Corrine with ethics. Like, how do you protect a place and make sure that people don't damage it, or you know, any of those things that happen with especially like sacred archaeological sites or really rare ecosystems, but you need people to care about them. So how do you get them to care? You would take them there, but you can't do that because of the ethics of ruining a place, or the carbon offset of travel, all of those things that go into it. So there's a wide array of why virtual is fantastic, even if it's not the real thing. So Lena, that was a great question. Thank you for asking it. And it really tees up why this can be so important.
Yeah, I think that, you know, be making sure that this is, you know, experiences are accessible regardless of your physical limitations is something that is always difficult, regardless of if you are a researcher or knowledge holder or an educator. So having another tool to use to provide people with opportunities to come along on your research or to places that they cannot physically go to because of physical limitations is a really important thing to consider.
And it's not perfect by any means too. I would like to point out, you know, immersive and 360 video is not perfect. It's currently very hard to close caption in 360. So that was one thing we were trying to work on. And, you know, that technology is still, it's so new and being developed that unfortunately, we see this in a lot of industries, not just this one. The impetus to make it equitable sounds good when you're thinking up a project, but then when the reality comes, it's funding that you may need to cut or has to go to something else. And that's unfortunate, and that's a bigger societal ethics issue that needs to be talked about. But unfortunately, with new cutting edge technology, that usually comes after it's been proven enough to be widely adopted, which, not saying it's correct, but that's one thing I've seen with immersive is making it more accessible.
And I'm going to invite Lena on and unmute her so she can also respond with her own comment.
Well, I think virtual reality is much, much older than technology. So we have the traditional yoik singing, storytelling, and not singing, it's remembering through yoik. And you claim you can have 4D, I can claim I can have 5D in yoiking. So if you're old and handicapped and can't climb a mountain, yoiking the mountain will bring you there. So we have a lot of old virtual realities. And I think if you use too much technology to reach this experience, you will get a handicapped spirit.
I can definitely see the argument in that. I can see the need to, like, everything, even in everything in moderation, including moderation. I think there's a way for those two things to come together, where I think the best of traditional ways of experiencing different realities, as someone who's participated in one, you know, something like that myself, and is a pioneer when it comes to technological immersion, there's ways that both can play together, and I think even better results. So for me, it's always an and, not an or.
Mm.
So I love any of those perspectives too, because now my head is wondering too, well, how do I create something like that with to make sure that it can be its fullest? What can they do together? And that's always the way I agree with most anything is, all right, great, that's amazing. How do we do more together? And I think that immersive lends itself to that, because you can create so many unique things.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point. Not an either or, but a yes and. And for those of you on Instagram, I would encourage you to look at the Arctic Youth Network's Instagram that I think does a great job of using new technologies to bring local, traditional, and indigenous knowledge, experiences, and cultural heritage through their stories. So I would encourage you to check them out.
And I can't support that enough. And that's one thing too, that I was fortunate enough last year to meet a lot of Indigenous communities that were using 360 to record important cultural moments and ceremonies and heritage that through, loss of community members or, knowledge not being passed down because it was squashed by, white supremacist tendencies in the US to drown out Indigenous culture. There are ways to preserve it and protect it. So this can be a tool. It's the yes and. It's how do you use this tool to help do the most good and make the strongest connection.
Absolutely. We have another question. I'm going to ask Kristen to come back on and ask a follow-up question.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, I'm being a question hog. I'm thinking about this in the context of my work, and I'm thinking about places that I might be trying to connect with or work with that have really bad situations, right? The immersive experience, if you did it as it is now, would be incredibly horrible, and it would you'd have a very negative emotion, and you potentially could connect with people's empathy and motivate them with that. But is it more effective? I guess there's a lot of questions embedded in here. Sorry.
No, but I'm following so far, so you're good.
Okay, so if you were to reimagine the place as a better, brighter future, and have people connect empathetically in a positive way, what are the considerations? Is that a better way to approach that kind of a problem or challenge than to share the negative experience? Or do you do both?
There you go. That's about what I was about to say. I think earlier the sense of wonder came up and how that drives and sparks people to want to do things. With immersive, you feel things. The first time I saw the final video of Bears Ears National Monument, the first event we did at National Geographic's theater, I got the overwhelming sense of being in like a church. And this was a virtual photogrammetry created experience. And it was not overwhelming, but I definitely felt it. So one thing you have to be careful of with experiences like that, where you do take people into places that are not positive, and that is the reality of what's there, you have to help them manage that emotion. So again, it goes back, I think, to storytelling. You need to guide people, help them get to that place, but you're also going to have to help them get out. Because if they're hit so hard with something that they then feel is hopeless, well, why am I going to do anything? It's that kind of fatigue that happens. So I think that there's a really powerful way to do it. And actually, when you were talking, I was thinking of someone I was working with, Ruben Salgado, who's a beautiful photographer who works with communities that use solar lights from Detroit to Latin America to Central America to India. These are beautiful photos, but he wanted to go a step further. He wanted to see how they're vital and crucial to life. If you're a migrant trying to cross borders for safety, what is it like for you to have a puff, like one of these solar puffs, on your back as you're walking down steep roads with tractor trailers inches from your face and a cliff on the other side? You can't know what that fear is like until you're there, but you have to take them there responsibly. So again, ethics. How do you get them there, get them to feel it, connect with it, know that there's something that I wouldn't want this. This feels bad. I don't want other people to feel like I feel now, but you have to take them back out of it. So if you're going to take them into that dark valley, you got to pull them out. So that's where you can say, if you engage, this is what it could be like, or this is what it was. Like, I think of potentially for like disaster relief, which timely, and this is me free thinking with Beirut right now. I'm sure there's beautiful 360 of that city before the accident, where the city was destroyed and people were injured and lives were completely shattered. to be able to give that kind of connection of the city is going through this is what it feels like, this is like what it was, this is what it was before, and with help and support it could be close to that again, it could be rebuilt, it could be something. It's, you can't leave them completely negative and broken that they can't do anything. You have to take them up a little bit. But I do think it's important to show those hard issues. So you have to guide them in. It's storytelling. It's getting them prepared for what they're about to experience, because they're going to feel things, and it's going to hit them differently than a documentary on something. But that's the first example I thought of is what Ruben's work is doing. And he's actually doing something really special lately, which is working with mariachi in Mexico City, because so many people can't go out and see the mariachi, or they're expats and, you know, diaspora throughout the world. He's doing 360 recordings of the mariachi, sometimes for unique performances that you can share with people. And that's how they're trying to raise money for the mariachi, because they no longer have money because there's no one there to give them money for their playing. So it's this kind of, how do you use 360 to actually create change, create connection, and bring some joy, but also highlight what's really happening. So those are some examples that I think are really unique ways of how 360 can do more. The one thing I would say is shy away from plopping a camera down in the middle of something and just letting it run. So some of the early reporting in 360 from like New York Times, it was amazing because it took you to places. You could be there, and it just kind of sat a camera down and you were in the middle of chaos or what was going on, but you weren't really being able to tell, like there was no story. So unless you have to kind of guide people and take people even in 360. So that's where that pre-production I was talking about comes from. So if you do all that, you can take them to places that are harder and share stories that are really important and not always beautiful, because that's reality sometimes.
Yeah, it seems like there's a being so immersive and hard, you know, you start to get hardwired into the brain. It seems like there's a risk of going too far, ending up in a PTSD situation.
Well, and actually, that's a good thing you bring up. There's two other projects I can think of, and I can give these to Victoria. They're published. National Geographic had a documentary series called The Long Road Home. It's an adaptation of Martha Raddatt's book. And there were 4 360 pieces that went with it that looked at PTSD. And you are in the eyes of one of the soldiers. And thankfully this is all done in a set because it was a narrative drama. So they had like full Hollywood big sets, but you're back in Kabul and you're experiencing the story from this perspective of this soldier and what he's seeing. And you're there in 360 and it's powerful. And there's also another story where that same team that created that, which is Black Dot Films for National Geographic, and this next project was for Google, with solitary confinement. So you are with, I think, 3 or 4 different prisoners in solitary confinement. You don't really know their age or their gender, their racial background, and it's meant to do that on purpose, but it's also not hiding anyone, because they want it to feel like it could be anyone. And this is what solitary confinement feels like. So you have to think of where the camera's placed. What's the height? Do you want it at, if you have something at 7 foot, it doesn't feel real. If you have something at 3.5 foot, are you a kid? And so that changes perspectives on everything. So yeah, there's really interesting ways to do it, but you have to be very thoughtful ahead of time about the story you want to tell, how you want to tell it, and how you want it to connect with people. It's a powerful tool.
So we have one question in the chat, and then I'll ask one question that we got on Instagram, and maybe you can do a 1-2 answer in our last 10 minutes together. So thinking about what you just said, that the PTSD series was a pre-recorded and scripted storytelling experience. Tao wants to know how you can engage audiences that maybe dislike dramas or cartoons that are more interested in, hard-hitting research. And here I almost think of the virtual reality work about bringing the archives around the moon landing, and being able to bring archival work, so humanities work, not natural science work, to life.
Yeah, and that is actually a really great thing to bring up when you're talking about that, because for me, I don't like the cartoonish stuff. I don't like CGI and VR, and that's why I'm trying to make sure I use my terminology very clearly. Virtual reality is CGI generated. You can interact with it, whereas 360 video can have CGI components that's computer generated or uses photogrammetry or archival, photos to stitch together something that is real, but you can be in the middle of it. So it's a different way of kind of looking at it. With what Victoria mentioned, there is, the ability to go into archives if there are enough images, let's say panoramas from the 1920s of spaces and places. You can turn those into 360 experiences where you can stand wherever the camera was. And so you feel like you're in 1920s New York, and then that changes to today's New York. You can replicate it. So it gives you passing of time, change, this sense of time travel. So maybe it's that fifth dimension that we were talking about with Lena, or maybe it's a different one, but you're able to transcend that. And hands down the best I've seen so far, because it's still one of those things I'm like, this actually happened. The team that I work with oftentimes at Black Dot Films was able to take archival images from the moon that Neil Armstrong shot himself. He had a big giant camera that was strapped to his chest, and all he had to do was push a button and he could take photos. So he just spun around in a circle and took photos of the moon. And so with machine learning and AI, they can reference the points where the pictures overlap, and you create a 360 bubble, an experience that can be put into a headset. And there's video that was shot on the moon. There's reference points are there too. So you're standing on the moon as if you're Neil Armstrong in the 60s, and then you see the lunar module or the lunar the car go by, and you're on the moon. And so for me, that's real life. That's experiencing something that really happened. It's not a narrative. And to kind of go back to the PTSD thing, that's a drama, that's a recreation of something that was real. This wasn't narrative. This was this person's real life told in a way that you could experience it. So yes, you weren't there when they were actually in the firefight in Kabul, but it was recreated in a way that you could feel like you were there while they told their real story. So I just want to be clear on that. I like the real world. My entire career has been telling stories about the real world to people, not, creating drama and narrative stories for a reason. And that's because the real world is by far more fascinating than anything you can make up. So the archive is great too. And there's other ways to do it. There's ways to scan objects. Could you imagine going into the set of Mary Poppins? I'm sure Disney somewhere has an entire vast trove of all their sets. They scan them into objects, and you could walk into old sets, and then you're experiencing history. Or if you can't access, the Capitol building in the United States, scans of that and turning it into experiences. Or if there are places in, like, let's say Angkor Wat, where you may not be able to go, or they can recreate it in a way that's restored. Mayan pyramids, where you see it today, and then in the blink of an eye, it's how it would have looked for the Mayan when it was at the height of their civilization. Those are all things that are possible through 360 and immersive in a way that is unlike anything else. And it's all possible by using machine learning technology, but then something a little special, which is storytelling and this ability to connect time as well. So that's a really cool way to think about how do you connect time and change that actually in virtual reality.
Well, now you're talking like a geographer, talking about space and place and time.
You spend enough time with them, it happens. I'm dating one.
Yeah,
that's part of the problem.
I too am biased as I'm a geographer, but it's a pretty great discipline to be in. So we had just 5 minutes left, and I want to ask this one final question that we got earlier in the week from an educator in Northern Canada. And they want to know who to reach out to or what organizations to reach out to if you want to use immersive reality in your classrooms. I don't have time to create immersive reality myself, but I want to connect with others who can help me use it.
That is a good and unfortunately a very hard question. It is very scattered right now. And because it is such a cutting edge technology, who's working in it changes day by day. What technology is the one to use? Unfortunately, when I was at National Geographic, when I left, there were over 500 Oculus Go headsets because they were the easiest to access, the most cost effective, and could be replaced easy. Well, they're now being sunset. They're not being made by the manufacturer anymore. So you've got the 500 until you don't. So that's the one hard thing. I would say for resources for that, the Hydrus is a really good one. It's very focused in that it's ocean education with immersive. Beyond that, National Geographic, when I was there, was budding working on interactive technology and design to do educational work, to take the great 360 content that they have and pair it with their resource library, which is already existing infrastructure of free resources to educators. So they're thinking of ways, we've got this great content, how do we integrate it? But unfortunately, other than that, I would say the best way to do it is to actually look at YouTube 360. I will recommend National Geographic hands down. They've got the best stuff. I'm no longer there, but still has a special place in my heart. Always will. They did really good work, and a lot of their 360 content is up on their YouTube. So you should be able to find the playlist, look at what they've got. Chances are there's also probably a magazine article and or something related to it where there'll be supplementary information. And in particular, I can know that the Bears Ears VR, the Polar Obsession VR, and the Galapagos VR that will be available on National Geographic's YouTube also has complimentary live shows that give you the context from the presenters themselves on the .org website. So again, that would be my recommendation. Other than that, there unfortunately isn't really a resource for 360 other than going to or having to pay through the paywall for New York Times, which did a lot of 360 early on and still does, but there really isn't a educational resource for it yet because funding for schools, unfortunately, is not what it should be before we even think about going into new cutting edge technology for students on any kind of scale, which is a whole larger issue to begin with. But that's the best I think I can offer off the top of my head. There's not there yet. There's also, I believe Lenovo had a VR classroom product for a long time, but I don't feel that that's free. I think that's also something that the school system has to buy into and pay for and make available. So the way schools get their product and educational learning things is a whole interesting system that does not, I think, in the end benefit a lot of students.
Well, it seems like we have our work cut out for us at democratizing this technology access for classrooms.
Yeah.
Maybe that is a question for further discussion at our in-person workshops in the years to come on how to do that in order to democratize access to information on Arctic migrations. But for now, we are at 3:30, so please again join me in giving a huge round of applause for an incredible presentation, and I would argue an even more incredible discussion after with Wesley Della Volla. We will be sending out a recording of this on YouTube, as well as some additional readings and links to our upcoming webinars that you can register for free. The next of which is next Tuesday, August 18th at 2 p.m., the same time Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Alaska time. And we will be hearing from incredible young researchers, high school students in Sitka, Alaska, and their mentors at Scripps Institute of Oceanography about how they've used long-term recordings of underwater sounds from a variety of whale species in the Gulf of Alaska and what they have learned about the impacts of us humans on whales and what that means for conservation policy. So please join us for that. The link is in the chat and we will be emailing it to everyone. But for now, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you all have a wonderful week ahead of you. And please reach out to myself or Wesley, whose email will be included in the follow-up, if you have any other questions or want a follow-up chat. But thank you again, and I hope to see you next Tuesday at our next webinar. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Thank